The Dolomites have been on my bucket list for almost 5 years, and I can safely say it's one of the destinations that has lived up to the hype. Most sensationalist Instagram spots often leave you disappointed, but that was not the case with the Dolomites, and in some cases, it even exceeded my expectations. After spending so long looking forward to this trip, we were going to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes. So we did our research to ensure that we had the best possible trip, because there's always some things to know that can separate a trip from being good to exceptional. This video is going to highlight how you could do 6 days in the Dolomites and have an absolutely exceptional time. From hiking iconic peaks like Tre Cime di Lavaredo and Seceda, to seeing the impossibly blue lakes throughout the Dolomites and everything in between, I am going to present to you what I think is the best way to do the Dolomites through our experience and research. I'm just going to focus on where you should stay and the locations you should go to. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have insight into the best way to do the Dolomites. So the way that we did it for our trip, and what I would recommend, is to have 2 bases in the Dolomites. And these 2 bases would be Ortisei and Cortina d'Ampezzo. Now, these are 2 towns that you can stay at which have a fair bit of accommodation, but you want to make sure that you book them well in advance. These 2 towns have been chosen because they provide access to a lot of the most iconic locations in the Dolomites. The reason for this as well is because you could just stay in one place, but unfortunately, because of the mountainous terrain, it can be very hard to get from one destination to another. It can be lots of driving through and around mountains. It ends up being a lot of time spent in a car. But your best option would be to have 2 bases, in my opinion. What we'll do now is go day by day and explain what we believe you should do. So day 1, you're likely going to have driven a fair way to get to Ortisei. Our recommendation is you get settled and make sure that you have everything ready for the next couple of days. The reason for that is because Ortisei is a fantastic little town. There's a fair bit to explore, and we probably didn't give it quite the justice that we should have, and we only got to explore it for a short period. It's not a huge place, but there's a lot of restaurants that we found to be very good. It's just a nice alpine town, and it really gives you a feeling of being in the Dolomites. Day 1, just immerse yourself in the area. It also gives you a chance to make sure that you've got everything organized for the next couple of days. You can check the weather and make sure that everything's going to go according to plan. Sometimes when you're rushing too much, it can be challenging to stay on top of those small things, which then end up being impactful. The other thing is this allows you to get early night, which is good because our recommendation is that you try and get to most locations earlier than everyone else. So you want to get there as soon as they open. So that logically leads us to day 2. We recommend for day 2, you do Alpe di Siusi. And this is a fantastic location. We recommend that you take the cable car up, try and get one of the first ones if you can. Once you've taken the cable car and you head on up, I still remember walking out of the cable car and being amazed at the view. You basically walk onto these huge, open, expansive fields, and then you've got some of the Dolomites in the background. We definitely recommend taking the cable car because once you actually get to the top, they're open and expansive, so you can do a lot of walking. We personally did about 12 kilometers when we went to Alpe di Siusi, but you can choose how long you want to spend up there. You can spend more time and check out more of the refugios that are at the top, which are little restaurants, or alternatively, you can spend less time. And there's a few different options as well. You can hire a bike, you can just walk it, which is what we did. It's definitely a location where you can get some fantastic photography and it almost feels otherworldly. So here are some photos of Alpe di Siusi, and this might give you a bit of a feeling of what it would be like to be up there. So now we'll move on to day 3. You're still staying in Ortisei and you can walk to the cable car that will take you to the next location, which is Seceda. You take 2 cable cars up to the top and you cover a lot of distance. We're going to recommend that your best option is to take the cable cars all the way to the top because you can spend a lot of time walking at the top when you get there. And I was even more impressed with the view as you walked out of the cable car at Seceda when compared to Alpe di Siusi, which is a high statement because both of them were absolutely amazing. When you get to the top, you can walk around the ridgeline, which is relatively short and not too strenuous, but we opted to do the bigger hike because we were choosing to do 1 location per day. We ended up doing a 12-kilometer hike. When you do this loop, you can end up at a great refugio with very reasonable prices, where we managed to get spaghetti bolognese for €10. This is called Refugio Firenze. In our personal experience, when we got there, it was just a bit over halfway. We had mostly gone downhill. We definitely needed to eat a little bit in order to get us back up to the cable car, which was pretty much all an ascent from there. But again, it's up to you. There's a few different tracks that you can do when you're up there. And if you have a look, in the future, we're going to be producing some guides, and they'll give a bit more insight into the different options that are available when you actually get onto Seceda. The big thing to remember here is that when you go to Seceda, it's very weather dependent. So if it's very cloudy, you're going to end up getting some photos that look like this. Whereas if it's bright sunshine or a little bit less cloud, you can really see the peaks stand out, and they'll look a little bit more like this. Outside of the ridgeline, there's actually a lot to see. Again, just like with Alpe di Siusi, I'm going to showcase some of the images that I got on Seceda, which will give you a bit of an insight into what it would be like to be on this mountain and exploring one of the Seceda loops. So now we're up to day 4. And this is where we leave Ortisei and move towards Cortina d'Ampezzo. In order to get there, it's a fair bit of driving. What we recommend you do is break it up about halfway through. We went from Ortisei, and then we wanted to go on the Passo di Gardena, which was an absolutely stunning road. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that you drive along there as well. I think you'd be missing out if you go and hop on the highway, because you don't really get an insight to how big and expansive the Dolomites actually are. Because this is just one day allotted to travel, I would recommend trying to find a place to stop in the middle. We actually did paragliding. I'll leave the link in the description because I've already done a video on this, but it was an awesome way to see the Dolomites. It's very different to climbing them or driving through them, and I would recommend it to pretty much everyone, as long as you don't mind heights. You'll end up getting to Cortina d'Ampezzo with some time up your sleeves, which means that you'll be able to take a little bit of time to enjoy the city. The main street is great to walk down, and there's lots of options for food. We would recommend that you get an early night's sleep after finding something to eat in the town. From the town itself, you can actually see mountains all around you. Here are some examples of some of the photos that I captured just from sitting in our hotel room, which is pretty unbelievable, really. Day 5, it's going to be 2 of the most iconic spots in the Dolomites, and that is Tre Cime di Lavaredo and Cadini di Misurina. These 2 locations are by far the most popular attractions in the Dolomites, which means that you want to make sure that you get there very early. You have to book your parking within a time frame. We booked ours from 5 a.m. till 6 a.m. and you have to arrive within that time frame. You can stay there after there because you're going to be there for the whole day, but we wanted to do that just to make sure that we got a car park in case it was very busy, and means that you're one of the first people on the mountain, which is essential because it gets very busy quickly. Now, I've done a whole video on these 2 spots in particular, and I'll link them in the description. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just give the quick tips. Make sure that you do Cadini first because it gets very popular. If you want that photo that pretty much everyone seems to have from the Dolomites, you want to get there early, very early. After that, you can then go and do the Tre Cime circuit, which will take you a lot longer, but it doesn't matter if there's as many people because it's spread out over a much bigger space. They're 2 really great hikes. Of all the locations that we've talked about, this is going to be your biggest day of walking, so be prepared for that. Make sure that you have at least running shoes, but probably hiking boots would be your best option. And like the other locations, I'm just going to put some pictures up here that will give you some insight into what it's actually like in these locations. So now we're up to the final day, day 6. We're going to be aiming to do 2 things, and both of them are lakes. Firstly, Lago di Sorapis, and secondly, Lago de Braise. Again, we're going to recommend that you get there as early as possible. For Lago di Sorapis, it's quite a big hike. It's about 13 kilometers out and back, which will take you likely about 4 to 5 hours. It's definitely a big day and it's a lot of walking. That being said, it's definitely worth it when you get to the top. There's a refugio there, which is excellent because you can grab a bite to eat. It's not too expensive. And there's some great views that you can enjoy while sitting there, either having a coffee or grabbing something to eat. And then if you continue along the trail to Lago di Sorapis, you will see possibly the bluest lake that you've ever seen. I personally don't see it because I'm colorblind, so it just looks great to me. But I hear that it is sensational and very unique. Not to mention you're still surrounded by mountains, which is always impressive to see. From a safety perspective, if it has been raining a lot, I probably would even suggest not doing it. There's a few points that are quite rocky and there isn't a lot of protection to stop you from slipping a long way down. At some points it's 400-meter drops. So if it's slippery and 400-meter drops, I'm gonna say probably best not to risk it if it's too wet. If you've finished up at Lago di Sorapis and don't feel too tired, we would highly recommend going to Lago di Braies. We did this a little bit differently in our trip. We went early the next morning before heading to Slovenia, but I think it might actually be better in the afternoon. The crowds seem to subside a little bit and you might not end up with a very foggy lake. Parking can be a bit of a challenge as well. There's 4 different car parks and there's 2 near the top. They're very expensive. From memory, it cost us about €17 for 3 hours, which is definitely on the higher side. It's about a 50-minute drive from Lago di Sorapis, which is a bit of a distance, but I'd say it's worth it if you can get there. The lake is very beautiful and you can see why it's such a tourist hotspot. The other thing to know is that you can row boats on the lake, which is something that's a little bit unique to the area. The only thing to keep in mind is that it's €50 to do so for the hour, which is very expensive. We opted not to do that. We walked around the lake instead, and it's a relatively easy walk that is about 4 kilometers in distance. Here are some photos so you can get an idea of what it would be like to be there. There's a bit of an insight into what we would recommend you do on a Dolomites trip to make sure that you get to see some of the best spots and miss the crowds while you're at it. If you feel like this brief outline of your itinerary could help you, then please hit the subscribe and like button. It really helps out on the channel. And there's going to be a lot more content coming out as the weeks go on. And have the Dolomites been on your bucket list? I know they've been on mine for a very long time, and I'm so grateful that I finally got to go and experience them for myself. I'd love to hear if you've been there or if you're planning on going. Feel free to reach out. I'm always up for a chat. Until the next video, see you in the next one. All right, see ya.